They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the people you trust most. But what happens when that betrayal comes from not one, but two people who were supposed to love you unconditionally? My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my perfect life crumbled in a single moment, and how I made sure they both paid for what they did. 3 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was 28, living in a beautiful apartment downtown with my boyfriend Mark. We'd been together for 4 years, and honestly, I was expecting a proposal any day. Mark was charming, successful, and everyone loved him. My family adored him, especially my younger sister Emma. She was 24, fresh out of college, and Mark had always been so supportive of her career goals. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. Mark worked in marketing for a tech company, and I was a graphic designer at a small agency. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future. Every weekend, we'd have dinner with my family. My parents treated Mark like the son they never had, and Emma always seemed so excited to see him. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a boyfriend who got along so well with my family. Mark would help Emma with her job applications, give her career advice, even drove her to interviews when her car broke down. He was always there for her, always willing to help. I thought it showed what a caring, family-oriented man he was. God, I was so blind. The signs were all there, but I chose to ignore them. The way Emma's eyes would light up when Mark entered a room, how she'd always find excuses to touch his arm when she laughed at his jokes, the fact that they'd often text each other about work stuff that somehow never involved me. But I trusted them both completely. Mark was my boyfriend, my future husband. Emma was my baby sister, the girl I'd protected and supported her entire life. I never imagined they could destroy everything I believed in. It was a Tuesday evening in March when my world fell apart. Mark had been working late more often, coming home around 9 or 10 p.m., claiming his company was pushing for a major product launch. I believed him, because why wouldn't I? Meanwhile, Emma had been distant lately, canceling our usual sister lunch dates and seeming distracted whenever we talked. That Tuesday, I decided to surprise Mark at his office. I'd made his favorite pasta dish and thought I'd bring him dinner since he'd been so stressed. I even stopped by the bakery and got those chocolate croissants he loved. I walked into his office building, took the elevator to the 7th floor, and headed toward his department. That's when I saw them. Through the glass conference room, I watched my boyfriend of 4 years kissing my sister. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, a deep, passionate kiss that spoke of intimacy, of secrets, of a relationship that had been going on for who knows how long. My hands started shaking so violently that I dropped the container of pasta. It crashed to the floor, the sound echoing through the empty hallway. They broke apart and turned toward the noise, and that's when our eyes met. The look on Mark's face wasn't guilt, it was panic. The look on Emma's face wasn't shame, it was defiance. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. Then I turned around and walked away. I didn't run, I didn't scream, I didn't confront them. I just walked away. But they followed me. Of course they did. "Sarah, wait," Mark called out as I reached the elevator. "It's not what you think." I turned around slowly and I remember feeling strangely calm. "It's not what I think?" I said quietly. "So you weren't just kissing my sister in your office conference room?" Emma stepped forward, and for a moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she lifted her chin and said, "We didn't plan for this to happen, Sarah, but it did, and we're not sorry." Those words hit me harder than seeing them kiss. We're not sorry. My own sister, the girl I'd helped raise, the girl I'd paid for when she couldn't afford textbooks, looked me in the eye and said she wasn't sorry for stabbing me in the back. Mark tried to do damage control. "Sarah, let's talk about this at home. Emma, you should leave." But Emma shook her head. "No more hiding, Mark. I'm tired of sneaking around." That's when I realized this wasn't a recent development. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single mistake. They'd been carrying on behind my back for months, maybe longer, All those late nights, all those helpful gestures, all those family dinners where they sat across from each other acting like nothing was happening. I looked at both of them standing there, and something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, burning in my chest like acid, but underneath it, something else was growing, something cold and calculating and absolutely furious. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't bear the thought of being in the apartment Mark and I shared, surrounded by our pictures and our memories and our plans for a future that had just exploded. Instead, I checked into a hotel and spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I'd missed all the signs. My phone buzzed constantly, text after text from Mark, from Emma, even from my parents asking if everything was okay because Emma had called them upset about something. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw them kissing in that conference room. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fall apart. I wasn't going to beg or plead or ask them to choose me, and I certainly wasn't going to make this easy for them. See, here's what Mark and Emma didn't know about me. When I get angry, really, truly angry, I don't explode. I plan. And I'm very, very good at planning. I went back to our apartment that afternoon when I knew Mark would be at work. I packed a bag with essentials and started gathering information. Our lease was in both our names, but I was the one who'd put down the security deposit. Our joint bank account had money I'd saved for our future. Our circle of friends were people I'd introduced him to. But more importantly, I knew things about Mark that could destroy his carefully crafted image. See, Mark wasn't just a regular marketing employee. He was being considered for a promotion to director, a position that would basically set up his entire career. And that promotion depended heavily on his reputation, his character, and his relationships with clients. What Mark didn't know was that I'd been doing freelance design work for his company for months. Not officially, just helping out a friend in their graphics department who was overwhelmed. Through her, I'd learned about the office dynamics, the gossip, the politics. I knew exactly who Mark had been trying to impress and who could influence his career. I also knew something else. Emma had been lying to our parents about her job situation. She'd been telling them she was working as a marketing assistant at a prestigious firm, but the truth was she'd been unemployed for 2 months. Mark had been giving her money, probably from our joint account, to help her keep up the pretense. As I sat in that hotel room with my laptop open, pieces of a plan started forming in my mind. They wanted to betray me? Fine. But they were going to learn that actions have consequences, and some consequences last a lifetime. I started with research, social media posts, timestamps, locations. I went through Mark's credit card statements, ones that came to our shared address, dinner receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, hotel charges from weekends when he'd told me he was visiting his college buddy in Portland, movie tickets purchased in pairs when I was working late. The evidence was overwhelming. They'd been seeing each other for at least 6 months, maybe longer. And they'd been incredibly careless about covering their tracks, probably because they never imagined I'd go looking. But the most interesting thing I found was a photo Emma had posted on her Instagram 3 weeks earlier. She was wearing a necklace I'd never seen before, a delicate silver chain with a small diamond pendant. The kind of necklace a man gives a woman when he wants to show affection but can't be too obvious about it. I reverse searched the image and found the exact necklace online. It cost $800. Mark had purchased it using our joint credit card. He'd bought my sister jewelry with our money I'd contributed to, money we'd been saving for our future together. That's when I knew exactly how to make them both pay. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I've always preferred mine with a side of public humiliation and long-term consequences. I spent the next 2 weeks setting everything up. Mark kept calling, texting, even showing up at my work, trying to explain. I let him think I was considering forgiveness. I'd meet him for coffee, let him hold my hand, listen to his sob story about how confused he was and how much he loved me. Meanwhile, Emma was telling our parents that Mark and I were having problems and that she was just trying to help us work things out. My parents bless them, kept calling me, asking if I needed to talk. I told them I was fine, just needed some space to think. But while I was playing the role of the heartbroken girlfriend, I was actually building the most comprehensive case for justice I'd ever assembled. First, I gathered every piece of evidence of their relationship. Photos, receipts, text messages Mark had carelessly left open on his laptop when he'd asked me to use it to look something up. I documented everything with timestamps and screenshots. Second, I did some digging into Mark's work situation. Remember how I mentioned he was up for that promotion? Well, it turns out the company had very strict policies about workplace relationships and conflicts of interest. More importantly, they had a zero-tolerance policy for employees who misrepresented themselves or their personal situations during the promotion review process. Mark had told his supervisors that he was in a stable, long-term relationship and that this stability was part of what made him director material. He'd even brought me to company events as his future fiancé. His entire promotion pitch was built around his image as a dependable, trustworthy family man. Third, I learned something interesting about Emma's unemployment situation. She'd been lying on job applications, claiming to have experience she didn't have, and references from companies she'd never worked for. But more importantly, she'd been collecting unemployment benefits while also receiving money from Mark, which was technically fraud. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I was going to expose them both, but not in some dramatic confrontation that they could spin or minimize. I was going to let their own choices destroy them, and I was going to make sure everyone who mattered knew exactly who they really were. But first, I needed them to feel comfortable. I needed them to think they'd gotten away with it. So I agreed to meet Mark for dinner at one of our old favorite restaurants. I wore the dress he'd bought me for my birthday, styled my hair the way he liked it, and let him think he was winning me back. "I know I messed up," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "But Emma and it was just confusion. You know how much I love you, Sarah. You're the one I want to marry." I looked into his eyes and said, "I know you love me, Mark, and I love you too. But I need to know this thing with Emma is completely over." He nodded eagerly. "It is. Completely. I told her it was a mistake and that I choose you." "And what did she say?" He hesitated for just a moment. "She understood. She wants us to be happy." Smiled and squeezed his hand. "Then, let's put this behind us. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll cut all contact with Emma. No texting, no calls, no helping her with job stuff. I need to know that part of your life is completely closed." He promised, looking so relieved that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. What Mark didn't know was that I'd already talked to Emma earlier that day. I'd told her I was planning to forgive Mark, but that I needed her to promise to stay away from him. She'd agreed, looking guilty, but also annoyed that she was being asked to give up her relationship for her sister's feelings. Neither of them meant a word of what they promised me. I knew that because I'd already seen them together again just 2 days earlier, grabbing coffee near Emma's apartment when they both thought I was at work. But that was okay. In fact, it was perfect, because their continued lies were just giving me more ammunition for what was coming next. The beautiful thing about my plan was that I didn't have to destroy them. I just had to create the conditions for them to destroy themselves. And trust me, they were about to do exactly that. 3 weeks after that dinner with Mark, everything was in place. It was the week of Mark's final promotion interview, and Emma was scheduled to interview for a marketing position at a company where our cousin Rachel worked in HR. I'd been playing the perfect, trusting girlfriend while documenting every lie they continued to tell. They were still seeing each other, still sneaking around, still thinking they were smarter than me. Mark would come home with stories about working late, while his location sharing showed he was at Emma's apartment. Emma would post vague Instagram stories about finding happiness in unexpected places while wearing that $800 necklace he'd bought her. But here's what they didn't know. I'd made copies of everything. every receipt, every photo, every piece of evidence, and I'd organized it all into a neat little package that told the complete story of their betrayal. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. Mark's promotion interview was scheduled for 10 a.m. At 9:30 a.m., his supervisor received an anonymous email with the subject line, "Concerns about Mark Thompson's character assessment." The email was professional, factual, and devastating. It included time-stamped evidence of Mark's 6-month affair, proof that he'd been lying about his personal stability, copies of expenses he'd charged to the company card for personal meals with Emma, and documentation showing that his stable relationship claims were built on deception. But the real kicker was a screenshot of Emma's LinkedIn profile, where she'd recently updated her work history to include marketing consultant for Mark's company, a position that didn't exist and work she'd never done. Mark had clearly helped her create this fake experience to pad her resume. The email concluded with a simple statement: a candidate for director position should demonstrate honesty and integrity in all aspects of their professional and personal life. The evidence suggests Mr. Thompson has been misrepresenting his character and potentially using company resources inappropriately. Mark called me at 11:15 a.m., absolutely panicked. "Sarah, someone sent emails about us to my work. They know about Emma and me. They have photos, receipts, everything." I gasped, putting on my best shocked voice. "What? Who would do something like that? Mark, this is terrible. Your promotion." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "They've postponed the interview indefinitely. HR wants to investigate. Sarah, I could lose my job over this." "I'm so sorry," I said. "This is just awful. Do you think Emma knows?" As it turns out, Emma was about to find out in spectacular fashion. At 2 p.m. that same day, my cousin Rachel called Emma to discuss her interview scheduled for the next morning. "Emma," Rachel said, "I need to ask you about some discrepancies in your resume. You list work experience at Thompson Marketing Solutions, but when we called to verify employment, they said they've never heard of you. Can you explain that?" Emma, caught completely off guard, apparently stammered something about it being consulting work, and maybe they contacted the wrong department. "I see," Rachel said. "And what about your unemployment benefits? Because according to your application, you've been employed for the past 6 months, but our background check shows you've been receiving state benefits during that same period. That's a serious legal issue, Emma." The interview was canceled, but more importantly, Emma now had to deal with an unemployment fraud investigation. But I wasn't done yet. That evening, I did something I'd never thought I'd be capable of. I called my parents and told them everything, not in an angry, hysterical way, calmly, sadly, with all the evidence laid out clearly. I told them about the affair, about the lies, about Emma's unemployment fraud, about Mark using our joint money to buy her gifts. I showed them the photos, the receipts, the timeline of deception. My mother cried. My father got so angry he had to leave the room. But what hurt them most wasn't just the betrayal. It was realizing how Emma had been lying to them about everything for months. "She told us she was helping you and Mark work through your problems," my mother said through tears. "She said she was being a good sister." The final piece fell into place that weekend. Mark lost his promotion. Not only that, but the company decided his pattern of deception made him unsuitable for any leadership role. He was transferred to a junior position in a different department, essentially a demotion with a significant pay cut. Emma's job interview wasn't just canceled. The company reported her resume fraud to other businesses in the industry. In a field where reputation matters everything, word spread quickly. She also received a letter from the state requiring her to repay $3,200 in unemployment benefits, plus penalties and fees. But the personal consequences were even more devastating. My parents, who had always been Emma's safety net, were furious and heartbroken. They didn't cut her off completely, but the special treatment stopped immediately. No more money for rent when she came up short. No more car insurance payments. No more family dinners where she was treated like the golden child. She betrayed not just you, but our entire family, my father told me. She lied to our faces while destroying her sister's happiness. That's not the person we raised. Mark tried desperately to fix things. He called, showed up at my hotel, even tried to get my friends to intervene. But I was done. When he asked for a second chance, I simply said, "You had 4 years of chances, Mark. You chose to throw them all away for my sister." The beautiful irony was that Mark and Emma's relationship didn't survive either. Turns out sneaking around and betraying people was the exciting part. When their affair was exposed and they faced real consequences, the thrill was gone. Emma blamed Mark for ruining her career prospects. Mark blamed Emma for being careless with evidence. They broke up 3 weeks after losing everything. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life in ways I'd never expected. The graphic design work I'd been doing for Mark's company led to a full-time job offer with a 30% salary increase. Apparently, they were impressed with my work and my discretion during the investigation. I found a beautiful studio apartment in a trendy neighborhood I'd always wanted to live in, but Mark had said was too expensive. I also did something I'd been putting off for years. I applied for a master's program in digital marketing. I'd always wanted to expand my skills, but Mark had discouraged it, saying I should focus on supporting our relationship rather than advancing my own career. 6 months later, my life looked completely different, and it was better in every way. But the most satisfying moment came 8 months after everything fell apart. I was having coffee with a friend when I saw Emma across the street, looking tired and defeated. She'd finally found a job at a small local business for about half what she could have been making in her field. Her reputation in professional marketing was basically destroyed. She saw me through the window and, after hesitating, came inside. "Sarah?" she said quietly. "Can we talk?" I looked at her for a long moment, remembering the girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd helped with homework and boy problems and life decisions. "What did you want to say, Emma?" I wanted to apologize, really apologize, not for getting caught, but for what I did, for betraying you, for lying to our family, for being the kind of person who could hurt her own sister like that. She looked genuinely remorseful, but I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no desire for further revenge, just a kind of sad emptiness where my love for her used to be. "I appreciate the apology," I said. "But Emma, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. Every day for 6 months, you chose to betray me. Every family dinner, every conversation where you pretended to care about my happiness, every lie you told, those were all choices." "I know," she said, tears starting to fall. "I know, and I have to live with that. But Sarah, you're still my sister. Can we ever fix this?" I thought about it for a moment. Maybe someday we can have some kind of relationship again, but it will never be what it was. You broke something that can't be repaired, Emma. And the person you are now, the person who could do what you did, I don't think I want that person in my life. She nodded, still crying, and walked away. I went back to my coffee and my friend, and I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was free. People always ask me if I regret what I did, if I think my revenge went too far, if I feel guilty about the consequences Mark and Emma faced. The truth is, I don't think of it as revenge at all. I think of it as justice. See, Mark and Emma made choices. They chose to lie, to deceive, to betray someone who loved them both unconditionally. They chose to risk everything, their careers, their family relationships, their integrity, for a secret affair that they knew would destroy lives. I didn't make those choices for them. I simply made sure that their choices had real consequences. In a world where people often get away with hurting others, where betrayal is minimized as complicated or messy, I made sure that wasn't the case here. Mark lost his promotion because he built his professional reputation on lies. Emma lost job opportunities because she committed fraud. They lost family relationships because they chose deception over honesty. Would those consequences have happened naturally? Maybe not. Cheaters often get forgiveness they don't deserve. Liars often escape accountability. But that doesn't make the consequences unjust. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that you teach people how to treat you. For 4 years, I'd taught Mark that I was someone who could be taken for granted, someone who wouldn't fight back, someone who would always choose peace over justice. I spent my whole life teaching Emma that her big sister would always clean up her messes, always forgive her mistakes, always put her needs first. But people who will betray you once will betray you again, unless there are real consequences that make them think twice. Today, 2 years later, I'm in a relationship with someone who values honesty above comfort, who includes me in decisions instead of making them behind my back, who sees my success as something to celebrate rather than something to manage. I have a graduate degree and a job I love. I have an apartment that's truly mine, decorated exactly how I want it. I have friendships that aren't tangled up in family drama or shared history with people who hurt me. Most importantly, I have self-respect. I have the knowledge that when someone tried to destroy my life, I didn't just survive, I made sure justice was served. Mark eventually found another job, though it took him over a year, and he had to take a significant step back in his career. Emma moved to another state and started over professionally. I heard through mutual friends that they both struggled with the reputational damage for a long time. I don't take pleasure in their struggles, but I don't regret them either. They earned every consequence they faced. As for my relationship with my family, it took time, but it's stronger now. My parents learned not to enable Emma's poor choices, and I learned that setting boundaries doesn't make me cruel. It makes me strong. The truth is, betrayal changes you, but you get to choose how it changes you. You can let it make you smaller, more fearful, less trusting. Or you can let it teach you that you're stronger than you knew, that you deserve better treatment, and that you have the power to make sure people face consequences for their choices. I chose strength. I chose justice. And I chose to build a life where betrayal simply isn't tolerated. Because here's what I know now that I didn't know then. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. And when someone chooses to betray your trust, make sure they understand that choices have consequences. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building a life so good that their betrayal becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. And trust me, that's exactly what I did.